have to credit, I had a manager at 160/90, this girl, Jackie, and she was the first person who actually made me believe that I was good at PR. I was able to put forward some producers that work on the SC Top 10 every single day, and for them to talk about that process. I think sometimes it gets a bit heated in the highlight room, but it was an amazing story to tell. And I don't think people know kind of these behind the scenes stories. ESPN's presence and our place in culture is so strong. And I believed, and a bunch of other girls who I worked with on this project believed, that we had to be there. And it worked out. And I'm very proud of it.
Welcome to The Stroll Season 1. I'm your host, Sam Thompson. In this season, I'll work to engage in conversations that dive deep into the intricacies of each guest's unique career, while also bringing to light the reality of how each guest maintains their health in the professional culture they work in. Today's guest is Bea Panitz, a communications manager at ESPN. At ESPN, Bea leads publicity for SportsCenter, the network's flagship news and information show, and ESPN's social media team, one of the most followed and engaged in all of sports. If you're wondering what this actually means, Beatrix is part of the team that helps shape how ESPN tells its stories to the world. From pitching news stories to the media, to managing talent press opportunities, to crafting messaging around major events, she works behind the scenes to make sure fans, reporters, and the public see the full picture of what SportsCenter is doing, and, more importantly, why it matters. Some of her biggest projects include launching SportsCenter Plus on Disney+, which brought SportsCenter to the streaming space in 50 states in 50 days, a cross-country tour taking the show on the road to connect directly with fans. Before ESPN, Bea worked in communications at Ralph Lauren, Autumn Communications, and Endeavor, telling stories across fashion, entertainment, and sports. Before her professional career, she was a Division I swimmer at Michigan State. Before jumping into today's episode, I'd like to briefly mention our charity partner, Sochabe, a federally recognized and registered 501c3 nonprofit organization. Sochabe is a grassroots charity organization that recently built Seminole Academy outside of Mbala, Zambia. For those who don't know, Zambia is a country in southern Africa. Sochabe was founded by my lifelong friend, Teza Seminyola, who named the Seminole Academy after his father. Teza is a lifelong tennis player and was ATP and ITF ranked in his heyday and was a member of the Zambian Davis Cup team. He started Sochabe over a decade ago and went on to build Seminole Academy to give the children in his home village the opportunity to attend school. Sochabe emphasizes academics while also providing students with the opportunity to play sports outside of school. If you'd like to donate to Sochabe, the PayPal donation link can be found at sochabe.com. That's SOCHABE.com. I'd like to highlight that Sochabe operates with virtually no overhead. Every single penny that is donated ends up directly funding education, school maintenance and development, and equipment. When Teza travels to Zambia to visit the school, he pays for his flights out of his own pocket. Once again, you can donate at sochabe.com, that's SOCHABE.com, to support Seminole Academy and Teza's goal of bringing education to the children of his home village. Thank you. One last little thing before getting to the episode. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for tuning into this episode and for supporting the podcast in any way that you do. This is a project that I really enjoy and really find worthwhile to invest my time into, so your support really means the world to me. Here's my conversation with Bea. No pun intended. I want to dive in and start with speaking about your experience swimming in the Big Ten for Michigan State. I'd love to hear about what that was like as a Division I swimmer.
So growing up in Westchester, New York, I was definitely a big fish in a small pond. I thought that I was Big Ten caliber swimming and slowly realized that I was not. It was very difficult for me. I don't want to say what if, because if I didn't swim at Michigan State, then maybe I wouldn't be here talking to you right now about all things ESPN and, my really fun job. But I do think that swimming wise, I would have succeeded a lot better maybe at a D3 level school, like a Denison or an Emory. I was my best as a big fish in a small pond. I will say that. I did not do well at Big Tens when Michigan State was getting last in the whole meet. We were last in like every single event. It was so hard. Big Ten swimming is out of this world fast. It's Olympians, it's international athletes. It's like the creme de la creme of swimming. So I had a really hard time mentally being an athlete at Michigan State, though the culture at Michigan State, aside from the culture on the team, the mentality of being a Spartan and being in East Lansing, which is like kind of in the middle of nowhere, kind of not, being with like-minded people, I loved that. I loved college football Saturdays. I loved a Michigan State rivalry. So the reason I went to Michigan State was for that Big Ten Midwest culture. But swimming wise, I definitely did not succeed as much as I wish I did. And I'm more than open to saying that. It was just very hard. And I ended up stopping swimming midway through my junior year because I realized I have to build that resume. My resume has literally lifeguard and swim coach. And I'm not going to get an internship being a lifeguard and a swim coach. And having joined no clubs at school, having very minimal kind of extracurriculars in East Lansing at Michigan State. So I stopped swimming midway through my junior year and I applied for an internship at Ralph Lauren. I worked PR jobs in East Lansing, midway through school, and also had a couple of retail jobs. Like I worked at Banana Republic, I worked at J. Crew at school. So my swimming experience was not great, but my experience at Michigan State was amazing. And I think that, I wouldn't be here without that. And I'm a very proud Spartan for sure.
Thank you for sharing. I think one really valuable thing that everyone could benefit from in life is just kind of hearing about, the I don't want to necessarily failures, but learnings of others. Because I feel like so many times, or most frequently in the media, you kind of hear about the big success stories, the people who have made it, and hearing about people who kind of had a learning from maybe, not the greatest experience in the world can also really be, I'd say, more educational than the people who, succeeded and were kind of the top of the top of the top of the top. Because as you mentioned, Westchester swimming, obviously to get recruited to and then go swim at Michigan State, you obviously had to be an incredible swimmer. But then, once you get there, you're in a whole new league. And out of my curiosity in the whole landscape of women's NCAA swimming, is the Big Ten kind of the top league there, or what are the top leagues?
The depth right now is pretty balanced between the SEC, the ACC, and the Big Ten. Obviously, with the Big Ten expansion, you now have UCLA and USC who are swimming in the Big Ten championship, which is wild to me. If you were to tell me this 5 years ago, I'd be like, what? But then you go over to the SEC and you now have Texas, and Texas swimming is amazing. And then you go to the ACC and you have University of Virginia, which is an absolute powerhouse for women's swimming. So it's definitely pretty balanced. And then when you get to NCAAs, I would say the top 10 teams, it's pretty split across the different, ACC, SEC, and Big Ten. But yeah, I mean, UVA, man, like they are out of this world. I don't know what they're feeding those girls, but it is a sight to be seen.
Yeah, I'm not going to act like I am a big enough college sports fan to know the whole landscape of all the different divisions, so I'm not even going to try to recount that. But if anyone in the audience wants to hear that again, just rewind maybe a minute or two. And kind of maybe taking one more step back over the full landscape of NCAA women's swimming. In other sports, we've seen kind of a big rise of prominence of like one kind of marquee star within that sport. So, women's basketball has Caitlin Clark. There's a few gymnasts that have kind of really risen to prominence. And looking back at the NCAA swimmers I know that maybe aren't, my sister, you, or the people that I met through my sister, but why do you think that swimming hasn't maybe gained the notoriety that perhaps college basketball or some of the stars within college swimming haven't gained the notoriety as kind of some of these other big female NCAA athletic stars?
Yeah, the one thing at Michigan State, which we would always laugh about, we'd always say, we're a non-revenue sport. We're a non-revenue sport. So, and RIP Michigan State swimming, the team doesn't even exist anymore. They cut it. So, you know, we're not generating a bunch of money. We're not. And with this whole new world of NIL and these TV deals, these football players and basketball, like that'll always be number one. And I think swimmers are starting to tap into a little bit more of this NIL world. They're doing brand deals. So it's coming, but I think it's just going to take a little bit longer because of this insane bump that, college football is getting. I mean, these college football players are professional athletes. Like, they are getting paid. Some of these college quarterbacks are getting paid like millions and millions of dollars a year. So it's really hard for swimming to compete with something like that. But every 4 years, thankfully, we have the Olympics. And that's when these men and women are given, this platform. We heard about the Walsh sisters. We heard about Kate Douglas. I always love seeing Ryan Murphy on my TV. He's a backstroker, by the way, from Cal Berkeley, for those who might not know. But yeah, I mean, the Olympics is a great every 4-year spotlight for swimming. And people always say to me, I only watch swimming when the Olympics is on. But yeah, I think with all the money that's being thrown at college athletics right now, I think it's really hard for swimming to compete with something like that.
Yeah, and I would pose that there's at least potential for swimming to try to capitalize on the contentification of sports, and because the races are so short, maybe that fits the content a little bit better into these short form content platforms. Maybe it's Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and so forth, where you can kind of maybe tailor the content well to be covered in that short of a duration of content.
There is a race from the 2008 Beijing Olympics. It's the men's 4x100 freestyle relay. And it's Michael Phelps, Jason Lezak, Cullen Jones, and Garrett Webergale. And I cannot believe I just spit all those names out for you. But 2008, and my memory is crazy. Jason Lezak comes up in the last 50 of this 4x100 relay, and he beats the French. And the French were talking smack the whole meet. We're going to beat the Americans. We're going to take that 8th medal for Michael Phelps. I have watched this race on YouTube maybe over 100 times, and I cry every single time I watch it. That is the beauty of sports highlights. And that is the beauty of swimming highlights. You could watch a 4-minute race, very fast. People have very short attention spans. And we always used to joke, like, our parents would travel far and wide for these swim meets only to watch us swim for 30 seconds. But in social media and for these, sports highlights, it's perfect. So, I mean, throw 50 freestyle on there, throw a 100 IM on there. It's the dine and dash. So, I mean, why not? I definitely think that is an untapped medium for swimming.
You mentioned that men's 4x100 from the 2008 Beijing Olympics. And that reminds me of this clip that one of my friends kind of showed me in college and we watch all the time. And I think I'm getting this right. I had to Google it, but I think it's like the Eden Prairie, Minnesota boys high school hockey team. There was like a triple OT state championship game where like somebody like, it's not like the most high def video, but you see like the guy flicking the puck into the net, like the game's over, everyone storms him, and the crowd's going crazy. And like what we always said was like, that's like a moment where if you're that kid that flicked it in, or I'm forgetting his name, but you're that final leg of the relay who beat out the French, like you die happy after that moment. Like no matter how the rest of your life goes, like you are sitting there on your deathbed and you are like satisfied.
And I think Lezak may have retired after this, but I will say this because I love your sister. One career highlight of mine, and this shows when I talked about before how big fish, small pond I was. It was my junior year. I was swimming for Ursuline. It was high school swimming, and it was sectionals, and it was the 200 IM. I was in the middle of the pool at finals, and I had Bea Thompson next to me. And this was before Bea and I swam club together. So we were just two gals with the same name, Beatrice with an X, that knew of each other and knew the other person was fast. And the first 100 of the race, I remember it so clearly. It's crazy. First 100 of the race, Bea was ahead of me. 50 fly, 50 back. She's a body length ahead. In the back of my head, I knew this girl can't swim breaststroke. I'm sorry, Bea. I'm sorry. And I was like, pedal to the metal. I remember like passing her on the breaststroke and winning the race. And that was the one and only time that I could say I beat Bea Thompson. But like, I remember it. And I remember every single lap of the race. And to me, like that, that was a career highlight. And she freaking crushed me in every single thing after that. But maybe that's when I peaked. Okay, everyone clock that was when I peaked my junior year when I beat Bea Thompson for the 200 IM and never did anything good after that. But I mean, yeah, like that's the beauty of sports, right? And that's the beauty of also being an athlete. Like, who can say that they can remember those moments so clearly like that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't need to go into them in depth, but there's obviously moments from my own sports career and anyone who played sports that you kind of really have those vivid memories. And there's things that they're memories that you really do hold dearly, and it's nice to cherish them. And I like to, now switch gears a little bit to kind of, you mentioned in your journey at Michigan State, when you left, you realized that maybe you're feeling a little bit of a sense of burnout. And then you decided that, hey, I actually want to kind of maybe set myself up for life beyond college and start to pursue professional opportunities. What was your journey like before ESPN to even get your foot in the door there? Because I'm sure for a lot of people who are either athletes in college or have followed sports all their life, a lot of people want to go thereafter and work in sports. And ESPN is what I would call like the marquee sports network. So what did you do before ESPN, and how did that maybe enable you to then get your foot in the door at ESPN?
So not sports and not television. My first internship was in fashion. I was a communications intern at Ralph Lauren, and then I got hired there full time and became a PR assistant, which I tell everyone was very Devil Wears Prada. I was schlepping samples all across New York, all seasons, many Ubers, many taxis, fetching lunch for my boss. But at Ralph Lauren, I learned just how to be an employee. I think as an intern, I learned how to like write emails, and I learned how to correspond with my manager. But at Ralph Lauren, I learned how to support the team, support my boss, who I was an assistant for, just all the professional parts of me. I credit to my time at Ralph Lauren. It was fast paced. It was intense, a lot of tears, but I think it's definitely made me who I am. And I have a tough side to me. And I think that's definitely because of my days at Ralph Lauren for sure. My job after Ralph, I decided when I was there, I was working on Wimbledon and I was working on the Olympics, and it was amazing. And that's kind of when I realized, hey, I think I want to work in sports. So I found an agency in New York, and I knew the agency side. And I say this to people when I'm networking with them. If you want to get a crash course in PR, work for an agency. And you could be an account coordinator, which is the lowest at the totem pole, and you feel it too. But you're still going to learn. You're still going to learn how to write pitches. You're going to learn how to build media lists. You're going to learn the ins and outs of how a publicist does their work. So I found a job that this agency, they were overseeing a bunch of different athletes and a bunch of athlete brands. So when I was there, I worked on Tom Brady's brand, TB12. I worked with Venus Williams on her personal PR. I worked with her on 11 by Venus Williams, which was her clothing brand. Then I also worked with a bunch of other lifestyle brands, which were separate from the athlete side. So I got a little bit of that Ralph Lauren lifestyle fashion still in my experience, while also dabbling with Venus and Tom Brady and those brands. And there I learned patience. It was a very boutique agency kind of environment, very small, all women. And I was there for a year. So if you were to look at my resume, you'll actually see that I hopped around every single year for 4 years. So every time it got to kind of August, September, I would up and leave. And I don't know if it's my ADHD or if it was me just trying to move up and get a different title. I actually can't really tell you what it was. But after I was at Jonesworks, which was the agency I just mentioned, I went to an agency called Autumn Communications. And there it seemed like they had all these amazing sports lifestyle brands. And I kept pushing to do that. They were putting me on, other lifestyle brands. I think they were looking at, again, my Ralph Lauren experience, the fashion side, when I kept saying, like, I want to work in sports. I want to work in sports. But they never really gave me those opportunities. There was a really great experience for me because I learned how to work with clients, which I'll get to at ESPN, has helped me in my job now. Client communications is really important. So I learned a lot of that there. How to put together a media plan, looking out 3-4 months. What are your dream headlines? How can we make this happen for you? What are some magazines or outlets you want to be in? So I was learning a lot of that at Autumn Communications. And then the job I had before ESPN, I was at a company called 160/90, which is owned by Endeavor, which also owns IMG and WME. So it's just a huge sports powerhouse. And I saw the opportunity and I was like, there's my sports moment. But again, was gypped of those sports clients. So I was always at these agencies where the sports were existing, but I was always being put on accounts where I wasn't working on sports. But I was always saying to the people I was working with, like, I want to work on these sports clients. I want to work on these sports clients. And they were like, your time will come. Your time will come. And I was a year in at 160/90. I never had any intention of leaving. I really loved it there. I have to credit, I had a manager at 160/90, this girl, Jackie, and she was the first person who actually made me believe that I was good at PR. I felt like for those last 4 years before that job, I was just floating by, doing the work. I was just another body at the agency, but she really made me feel like I was good at what I was doing and made me feel very confident. Job at ESPN popped up and I said, what the hell? I'm not going to curse on the pod. I'm going to apply. Like, what's the worst that could happen? They say no, they say no. And this was a time personally where I was debating, am I staying in New York City? Am I not? My lease was going to be up. And New York post-COVID was just a difficult place for me personally. I didn't feel safe there and it was getting expensive. So I went for this job at ESPN. It was 3 to 4 months of interviewing. I had to do writing tests. I spoke with like 4 or 5 people throughout the span of 4 months. It was very, very rigorous. But the whole time, I just had this gut feeling that it was going well, which for me, I'm not the most confident in myself, and I am working on that. But for some reason in my gut, I was like, I really think I'm going to get this. And I did. And I left New York. I was asked to move to Bristol, Connecticut, which is really in the middle of nowhere, but is a lovely place to be. And I've been here for 3 years now, which is crazy to think. So that's kind of that career journey to getting here. But I think what sold ESPN on me, I have no television experience. I have no, sports league experience. I think it was my PR experience. And that can be translated anywhere. If you can promote a product, if you can write a press release, if you can build a media list, if you can pitch, if you have media relations, like, you're good. And if you're passionate about the product that you're working on, then why not? So I had that hardcore PR experience, and I think that they saw that in me, which was really nice.
Yeah, that was an incredible storytelling journey of your career arc. I feel like I saw your development not only as a person, but as a professional. It seems like at Ralph Lauren, you kind of learned the nitty gritty of being an employee and kind of the core toolkit there. And then you moved on to your first agency and you kind of learned a little bit more about how to support your teammates and kind of like push for the objective of an organization, not necessarily what was on your plate. Then in your next role, you maybe improved your client hands a little bit. Then in that final role before ESPN, It really seems like a really wonderful mentor or maybe manager that you had, Jackie, who kind of maybe gave you the faith that, hey, I am really walking the walk right now and can do this successfully. And that kind of propelled you to your role at ESPN. And would
Yeah.
you say that, for somebody maybe listening to this who wants to work in sports media, that your background to a place like ESPN was more of a traditional background where you kind of work in a different industry, maybe for a few years, kind of building that core toolkit, and then you go into ESPN? Or do you find that most of your colleagues at ESPN actually have been in the sports space for a while before joining the company?
I would say have been in the sports space for a long time. And when I joined, I was 26 years old. I'm crazy. It's crazy. I'm turning 29, but everyone in my age group had been there as postgrads. Like that was their first job out of college. So they all started together. They all knew one another. A lot of them had been at ESPN since the jump. Some people that I work with now were doing PR at different universities. They were doing communications and supporting different networks like NBC. So I think a lot of people that I talked to, and I was also, while I was interviewing, was looking at the resumes of the fellow senior publicists at ESPN. And I was like, okay, this guy worked for the Patriots. This girl worked for the NFL. This girl worked for the Winter Olympics. And where do I fit in? Oh, I worked at a PR agency in New York City and I have no sports experience. But again, didn't intimidate me. I knew I had the PR chops and grew that confidence at 160/90. But to answer your question, everyone has sports experience. And one way or another, people all have intertwined at some point. And that's maybe how they got to ESPN, or, they worked with someone way back when. I was with my colleague Rachel today in the CAF, and she hugged someone. We call it the CAF. It's very college. We're on a campus. We were in the CAF. She hugged someone. And I was like, how do you know that woman? And she was like, oh, when I was at UConn, she was at Providence and she would produce this. And we worked together 25, 30 years ago. So it goes way back. And yeah, I would say everyone definitely has started in sports. So it was a tough transition for me going into television and learning that world as well.
And what is your favorite part about your role now at ESPN and all the different responsibilities you have?
Yeah, I would say no day is the same. Every day is different. I could be doing the same thing for a specific project, but the content of the project is different. Sports Center, that's my main property. We have a 7 a.m. show. We have a 2 p.m. show. We have a 5 p.m. show, a 6 p.m. show, an 11 and a 1 a.m. And we also have Scott Van Pelt, who has his show based in DC, which usually is after big events that we have on our air. And every show is different. We had Saquon Barkley on the 6 p.m. Sports Center yesterday. That's huge. So I love the variety of the content. It's never boring. And I feel like I'm always on my toes and I'm never bored and I'm always learning. So that's some of my favorite stuff.
And what have those learnings been over your 3 years at ESPN that kind of coming in, you maybe didn't have in your toolkit, and then now 3 years in, you feel a little bit more comfortable with, and you feel enable you to succeed on the job?
Yes, I would say to slow down. I think part of me with my ADHD is sometimes I get an idea and I move super, super fast. And I learned in kind of my first year at ESPN, I'm working with a lot of ESPN veterans, men and women who have been at the company for 25, 30 years. I need to grow up. I cannot be moving 100 miles an hour and making mistakes on email. So I was just like, you got to slow down. I would say the second is kindness. One thing I've learned at ESPN is the people are just so kind. I think that also comes from our culture in Bristol, Connecticut. It's a campus, but it's also kind of a bubble and everyone knows everyone. And you just want to be kind to people and you want, what goes around comes back around. You want the next project that you work on with someone to go well because, you were kind and patient with them before. So kindness is second. And third, I would say to never be afraid, to kind of be fearless. One thing, and I'm not going to brag about myself, but maybe I will because I'm on a podcast with Sam Thompson. I went to the Met Gala last month, which is crazy to say as someone who works at ESPN. But I had this idea with a fellow coworker of mine who's a SportsCenter anchor, Christine Williamson. And months and months ago, when the theme of the Met Gala came out, she said to me, the athletes at this event, it's going to be crazy. We need to go. So we pitched all these SportsCenter producers this idea. And at first they were like, no. Mind you, I'm a 28-year-old girl at this company of men. There are women, but I mostly work with men. I'm not even going to shy around that. It's intimidating, especially if you have an idea that is totally out of this world that we've never done before. And SportsCenter every single day, it's pretty much the same thing. A lot of these producers haven't really, they come up with creative ideas for the show, but something like this is just a bit bigger. So we pitched them. We fought for the idea. We ended up going to the Met Gala and getting an insane number of interviews. Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, Dwayne Wade, Stephon Diggs, multiple women who play in the WNBA, Sabrina Ionescu, and we had amazing sound bites. We even got a soundbite from Anna Wintour, who was talking about the impact of athletes and culture. Unbelievable. These athletes are celebrities in their own right. So I pitched this idea and I was fearless and I just believed in myself, even though some people were maybe rolling their eyes and saying that this is, we're losing the plot. Someone actually said we're losing the plot. But at the end of the day, it was a great success. And we had amazing content for SportsCenter, our social team on TikTok. We had videos that were doing upwards of 8 to 10 million views. Why would we not be there? We're a sports entertainment brand. We want to be where the athletes are. So I would say slowing down, kindness, and also being fearless.
And I'd like to, for my own honest background, and then also the audience, what was the overall theme of the Met Gala? And then what was that idea that you pitched that ultimately came to fruition and you guys executed while you were there?
Sure. So it was dandyism and the history of Black suiting and tailoring and fashion. So with that, you had LeBron James, who was on the chair, Lewis Hamilton, and Simone Biles. So what, goats in their own right? Why would we not be there, right? So, and we knew that people were going to show up and show out, and we had such a great spot on the carpet. And I mean, the athlete list was wild. So Stephen A. Smith was supposed to be there, but he did not attend. So that would have been amazing. But I do hope he goes next year. But ESPN's presence and our place in culture is so strong. And I believed, and a bunch of other girls who I worked with on this project believed, that we had to be there. And it worked out. And I'm very proud of it.
And so not only, it sounds like were you there in terms of a production sense, you were on the red carpet interviewing athletes as they came by. You guys also as a team ended up going to the Met Gala, if I understand correctly?
Yes, we were there as a team. I helped get the credentials for the three of us. We had a on-air talent, Christine. We had a producer who was also camera woman, so she was playing many hats. And for me, before the Met, I was just playing it. I had no idea who was going to be at the Met Gala, but I was just guessing. And the list actually doesn't come out until an hour before we were going on the carpet, which was crazy. We were all sitting in the depths of the Met Museum with all of the other media and all of the photographers. And at 3:30, we were given a stapled piece of paper with the list of all of the people that were going to be attending that night. And before the Met, weeks out, I was reaching out to athlete publicists, athlete managers, kind of soft sounding and saying, hey, ESPN's going to be on the carpet. We would love for your athlete to keep an eye out for us. We're keeping it light. We're just going to talk about the fashion in the evening. We're not going to ask any tough questions. So don't think we're going to like get you on anything, but we would love to chat with you and just give your athlete a heads up that we're going to be there. And the response was so positive from these publicists and managers, excited that we were going to be there. One of the highlights of the night, Sabrina Ionescu, who plays for the New York Liberty, she's amazing. She saw the ESPN mic flag and then saw Christine, who she knows so well. And it was almost like she just chilled out a bit because it was comfort to her. ESPN is comfort to her. And it was just amazing to see that relationship that we have with these athletes as well. So yeah, it was a combination of getting credentials for us to be on the carpet, putting in that application. Like we had to get approved. It's not like you put in a credential application and you get it. Like no, the Met and the agency KCD that oversees all the operations, they approve who goes on the red carpet. There were a few sports people that didn't get approved. I'm not going to name names, but we were so grateful that we were like that one sports outlet that was there. So got the credentials approved, worked with athlete publicists to get the word out that we were going to be there. And then the day of the Met in the morning, I was putting out some promo, how to find our content. We're going to be on TikTok posting, catch some content on SportsCenter. So I was doing a bit of that as well.
That all seems incredibly exciting. And just to also kind of get to be there and see the fruition of your idea come true. When I worked in consulting, one of the most frustrating things was doing all this work and then not necessarily getting to see the execution or kind of what came of all that hard work that you did. And I'd also like to say that I actually got to see Game 5 of the WNBA Finals when the New York Liberty won.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Ionescu didn't have her best game that game, but it was still an incredible experience. And I was just blown away by the quality of the basketball, to be completely honest, and just how wonderful it was as a fan of basketball to watch that game and then the skill of the players. And one thing that is a little bit switching gears here and I don't maybe necessarily want it to be a negative aspect, but it is kind of a real tangible part of working in sports, is that now that you are working in sports, kind of this thing that you love in your life, which is sports, has now also kind of in a way become your career and is what you're working on all day. So maybe it's not as enjoyable when you're working on SportsCenter all day to come home, turn on the TV and watch some sports. How has that been, and how has your relationship as sports changed as a result of working in it?
Yeah, I would say balance, but I'm 3 years in and I still catch SportsCenter at 7, at 2, and at 6. And sometimes the next morning I'll wake up, when I get to my desk, and I'll throw on the 11 just to kind of watch it back. I haven't gotten burnt out from it yet. I hope I never will, but I'm not someone who's watching all 100 something NBA games. I'm not watching every Yankee game. So I'm not that locked in, but I keep it pretty surface level. I know everything that's kind of going on that's pretty top level. One thing I will say, at ESPN, we have something that's sent to us multiple times a day. It's called the Hot List, and it's an email going over kind of the hot topics from, the past couple of hours. It's one of the best emails I get in my inbox. No offense to everyone else who emails me, but I love it because I'm staying up to date on all the news topics in sports. And I have found that I still open every single email that I get from the Hot List. I still file every single email that I get, and I will never be tired of it. I love NFL Sundays. I will sit in front of my TV from 1 p.m. until 8 and watch the NBC primetime game. But from 1 to 8, I'm watching NFL Red Zone nonstop. I love it. So I really think I'm in the right job because I haven't been burnt out from it. But sure, on the weekends, maybe I'm not tapping in to some of our programming as deeply, but I'm still locked in on TikTok and Instagram, and I'm still watching the highlights. So I know I sound crazy that I should take a break from it, but I love it. So it's a job, but it's also fun.
No, I think that's really the goal in life, is to kind of not feel that sense of burnout, and to what you're doing for your career on a daily basis as your job is something that you truly enjoy and don't kind of see it as watching the minutes on the clock go by, but actually as something that you enjoy and kind of want to consume and engage with in your free time. And another similar question in that vein is, what is the actual most challenging part of your job that you have to kind of go through on a daily basis that kind of continues to push you? And, it seems like you've taken all these steps in building your toolkit over the, I think, 7 years of your career so far. And kind of what's that kind of next step that you're working towards and building upon, and kind of that most recent part of your toolkit that you've been developing?
Definitely. I would say the most difficult part of my job specifically, I can dive into our PR department really quick. We have 40, 50 people within our department. Each person oversees a different property. Property I oversee is SportsCenter. It's a daily sports show. It's news. There are people that oversee the NFL. They oversee college game day, college sports, and that's not easy. It is a lift. You're working with the leagues, you're working with programming, you're on the road, you're going to these games, you're working with media, you're working with the on-air announcers, but you have something consistent that's rolling in. You have events to be talking about, you have games to be promoting. For me on SportsCenter, it's hard. It's, 6, 7 shows a day. Each show has its own personality and is different and is covering other things, but it's hard to promote. And what I try and find is, what's a good story to be telling this month, trying to find, as we call it, evergreen angles. So last year I was thinking, I don't know if anyone has ever told the story of how the SportsCenter top 10 is put together, right? You see it, it's iconic, it's at the end of every show, but how does it get done? And I reached out to a writer at Boardroom and he loved it. And I was able to put forward some producers that work on the SC top 10 every single day, and for them to talk about that process. I think sometimes it gets a bit heated in the highlight room, but it was an amazing story to tell. And I don't think people know kind of these behind the scenes stories. So one challenge of my job is digging really, really deep, finding these stories, shadowing these show teams. I think next week I'm going to have like a 3 a.m. call time because I'm going to shadow our 7 a.m. SportsCenter because I want to learn, how do you guys put a show together from events that happened the night before? I've done an 11 o'clock, which is, highlighting the games that are happening currently. I've done a 2 p.m., which is highlighting what's happening going into the evening and maybe a couple highlights of the day before and also what's going on in the news. So I know the personality of each show and I know what goes into it, but I really take the time to get to know these show producers and shadow them and kind of figure out, okay, I could spend a morning with a show producer and I could have a story to pitch, later that day. But yeah, I would say the difficult part of my job is digging really, really deep and finding some of these story angles that are a little bit more evergreen rather than, these hot topics that are just kind of like thrown at you, like a, Super Bowl or college football championship. So it's a little bit harder. You got to dig a little bit.
Yeah, I just have to say, love the top 10 every day, but my personal favorite was, I think it's every Friday if I remember correctly. As a kid,
Not.
I was there with the not top 10, and that was like the highlight of turning on the TV was those not top 10 plays. But kind of getting back to the crux of your answer there was really about crafting these stories, and how something that I actually never thought about or really took the time to think about is that each different show has its own, as you said, personality and kind of how you want to bring that out. As you've worked on these different shows and then just also kind of pitch stories in general, how has your maybe ability as a storyteller grown? And then kind of how do you think you ultimately kind of improve that and kind of have been able to tease out what might be a better received story than others?
Yeah, I would say, I think before I got to ESPN, a story that I thought was good, maybe at this point I would be like, girl, what were you thinking? You were reaching. one part about my job, which is different from maybe other publicists, is I actually have the opportunity to write. So we have a blog, it's called ESPN Front Row, where publicists actually contribute and are authors to the site. So if there is a moment where, it's an amazing producer, he has this connection to a feature that he put together, I don't think that a sports business journal or a front office sports is going to pick up something like that. So we kind of take it upon ourselves to control the narrative, to write and tell the stories ourselves. And I, at first, when I started, was probably not the best writer creatively. I was more of like a PR writer, pitching press releases, AP style, like very factual. But yeah, I've definitely, in the last 3 years, my storytelling abilities have grown. It's a matter of, as I said before, getting to know people, knowing their backgrounds. I mean, I'm rambling, but we have 50 states in 50 days for SportsCenter coming up. Kicks off on June 27th at 5 p.m. And our first state is Washington, D.C. with Scott Van Pelt. But there are a lot of anchors that are going on the road. I'll say Michael Eaves, for example, he's one of our SportsCenter anchors, and he's born and raised in Kentucky. And his state is Kentucky. So that's an amazing storytelling opportunity for me and whoever else is going to be helping me on Kentucky, to tell his childhood story of growing up in Kentucky and him being back as a SportsCenter anchor, something that he dreamed about as a kid. So yeah, I would say my writing ability has definitely strengthened in the last 3 years, and also pinpointing where a good story is and what the right audience might be. What outlet could it be for? Is it a social media play only? Is it for, ESPN Front Row only? So finding the correct spaces for certain stories. Yeah, I've definitely really figured that out in the last 3 years.
It sounds like, and maybe to put it in like an entrepreneur's terms, it's maybe like product market fit, figuring out which stories are going to best fit in with the personalities of what shows, and then what audiences might be tuning into those shows.
Yeah, shout out marketing.
Yeah. And you mentioned this, I think you said it's 50 states, 50 days with ESPN.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How long are those shows? And then what is like the juxtaposition between, like, I'm from New York, I'll say like New York, the show in New York, and then the show in like North Dakota, South Dakota, Idaho. Like what is the difference in stories? Is one more like kind of broad strokes? One gets really nitty gritty into the details of one particular aspect of the state. How kind of would a writer or a producer approach, or someone in PR approach those two states differently?
For sure. So our 50 states in 50 days stunt kicks off on June 27th, as I mentioned, and will run for 50 consecutive days across 50 states. So every single day, we will be covering a different state, but we'll be utilizing all different SportsCenter editions. So, June 27th will be in DC, that's at 5 p.m. But June 28th will be UFC fight in Las Vegas. That's nighttime. So we're going to utilize the 11 p.m. SportsCenter to be on site for that. So it's going to be challenging from the PR side, because you could have an 11 p.m. show in Las Vegas, and then the next morning you're going to have a 7 a.m. show in Alabama. So how do you kind of figure out that cadence and, timing, getting the word out, maybe not overlapping with one state over another for those 50 days, and also not hosting such an insane amount of content where people get a bit, oversaturated with it. But to that point, I don't think that people will, because what we're doing is we're doing a mix of 3 different things. We're doing full shows, so 2 anchors at a desk for, I would say, 9 shows throughout the summer. Then we're going to be doing split shows where 1 anchor will be on site at whatever event that they're covering, and then 1 anchor will be based in Bristol, Connecticut. And then the third, which is actually happening right now as we speak, producers are going out on the road to Hawaii, for example. I don't think we could get a SportsCenter desk to Hawaii, but we're going to produce a feature on surfing and athletes in Hawaii and that culture, because that's the culture in Hawaii. That's sports in Hawaii. So for the Hawaii Day, we're going to have like a quick turn kind of feature and highlight on the state and, what sports means to them there. So yeah, it's going to be a combination of those three things. I think it would be hard to have a full Sports Center show for all 50 days. We do have 20 or so anchors, which are going to kind of split that responsibility. And some have requested certain states over others, which has been really funny to see. But yeah, it's going to be hard on the PR side, but I would say rewarding. And we're really going to be tapping into local media. So let's say we're in Iowa for Field of Dreams. I mean, iconic, right? So we're going to tap into local Iowa media days leading up to the event, get media out there, have them, look behind the scenes of the show. Even like these media, we're going to have them almost standing and like watching the show, like IRL. So getting them out there, experiencing and meeting the anchors. We're going to try and draw in like huge crowds. It's not going to be as big as College Game Day, but we're going to try. And it's just going to be exciting. And I think combination of PR, obviously marketing is going to do a really good job of getting the word out with radio stations and local markets. But yeah, it's going to be a beast of a summer for sure.
Sounds like a big sprint, but one that will also hopefully just kind of be looked back at as maybe like an ESPN 30 for 30.
We did this stunt in 2005. So this is kind of an ode to the stunt that we did in 2005, 50 shows, 50 states, but 20 years later, re-evolved for the modern day sports fan. And the concept of this 50 shows, 50 states, anytime, anywhere. We're also launching our direct to consumer product at the end of the month in August. So 50 shows, 50 states will kind of bleed in, pushing that anytime, anywhere. And that's also the concept of our direct to consumer product, ESPN, anytime, anywhere. So it all goes hand in hand. We like to call it synergy. So
yeah, synergy, or kind of like an ecosystem of content that will hopefully, push people to that direct to consumer. And I'm curious to take a little bit of a step back now and kind of hear a little bit about you as a person rather than as a professional.
Yes.
So you mentioned that you moved, I think it was during COVID, from New York City to Bristol, Connecticut. How has that transition gone? And what are those things that you've, I think it's very easy to imagine what you give up leaving a place like New York for a more suburban lifestyle. But what are those things that you've gained in Bristol that you've really enjoyed?
Yeah, for sure. And I could talk about ESPN all day. So thank you for giving me that platform. New York City, for me, I loved it. I'm from Westchester, New York. My parents, raised me in New York City and then moved my sisters out to Westchester when we were in kindergarten, first grade, second grade. So I know New York. I'm a New Yorker. My grandparents were New Yorkers. My great-grandparents were New Yorkers. So it's definitely ingrained in me. But for some reason, post-COVID, I know I mentioned this at the top of the conversation, the city became really difficult for me. It felt unsafe. Rent was just really getting expensive. And on a PR salary, it's a little hard to afford anything nice in New York City at that point. So the decision to move out here was obviously hard for my social life. I miss my friends, like my OG friends, girls who I went to high school with, that are still in New York, that I try very hard to keep in touch with as best as I can now. But the move out here for my mental health was not that difficult because I knew, maybe I am someone that would thrive better in a suburban environment. And I was totally right. I'm in a town that I would compare similarly to a Scarsdale or a Rye, where I am in walking distance from amazing restaurants and fun bars, and the culture is definitely still here. And I'm an hour and a half drive from Boston. I'm an hour and a half drive with train access to New York City. So I'm smack in the middle of the two cities, but I still have that calm. A lot of my friends find it crazy that I'm using a car to drive to work. They find that to be the craziest concept. But I think that I have found that this is for me and I love it and I'm at peace. And when I do go to the city, my blood pressure definitely goes up, but I love my friends enough that I will risk it for them.
And outside of, work and this transition, what have you been doing kind of for your own health and wellness out in Bristol? So you obviously swam for Michigan State in college. Have you
Mhm.
continued swimming? Have you kind of adopted other forms of exercise? Kind of what do you do to keep yourself in shape and give your body that exercise that it needs?
I have taken up, and this, I use the word taken up very lightly, cycling. And I also want to shout out Jake, who might be listening. I heard that he biked from Boston to Hyannis the other day, 80 miles.
Yeah, 80
Is that
miles.
correct?
Yeah.
Unbelievable, Jake. Shout out, Jake. And so I've kind of taken up cycling. I'm not clipped in yet. I'm still using flat pedals, but I've done a 20-mile ride and it's become a hobby for me. And it's so fun to have a hobby and to learn something. So I've been doing that. Swimming for me, it ebbs and flows. I will get into these grooves where I'm swimming like 3 times a week for a month straight. And then I get sick of it. And then I don't do it for like 6 months. So that's my ADD talking. But I love to run and I love the Peloton. I'm looking at my Peloton right here. My Peloton is my best friend. And that's usually my morning workout, I would say. I cannot go to work without exercising. I can't do it. I will be slumped over, exhausted. Exercise is my coffee. I don't use it for, like vanity reasons. I really use exercise for energy and for strength. So I'm usually a morning person so that I kind of go into each day feeling good. And I get to my desk and I feel like I had a shot of espresso. And I've been staying away from coffee. I'm more of a matcha girl these days. But yeah, I enjoy it. And BB and I talk a lot about, the transition from, and I'm sure maybe this was your next question, from being a full-time college athlete, training 40 hours a week to kind of figuring out this lifestyle of exercise almost as a tool and a hobby instead of maybe your job.
Yeah, it is a really, and I'd love to dive into it a little bit deeper, but a
Mhm.
really crazy transition. I remember for myself as someone in college, I wasn't even a varsity athlete. I did I was a women's basketball practice player. I was on the men's
Heck
club
yeah.
team. I just, would get active with my friends. I was walking everywhere to then, at least at McKinsey, like being plopped in a desk for 15 hours a day and just being like,
Mm.
holy crap, my body, I didn't move today. Like my exercise, quote unquote, would either be at 11:30 or 12 at night after
Oh
work,
my God.
or I would put the standing desk up and be like, all right, I'm going to stand for 2 hours. That was like my exercise for the day. But it's even probably an even starker contrast when, as you said, you're a varsity athlete, you might have 4 hours of built-in physical activity a day that is almost like university sanctioned. So that's actually protected. How is that transition and how did you kind of figure out your own cadence to working out when, it wasn't as set in stone for you when you are a varsity athlete?
It's crazy to think that it has been 8 or 9 years at this point since I have stopped being a college athlete. That is crazy. When it gets to double digits, I'm going to be like, where is the time going? But when I first stopped swimming, and I'm okay with saying I quit swimming, I was a college quitter. I swam up through the halfway through my junior year. I got to a point where I was just so burned out. The culture on my team was not that great. It wasn't suited for me. Maybe other girls found it to be successful for them, but not for me. And I stopped. And that was shocking because my body just went into like, what are you doing? I definitely put on weight, even though I was like trying to exercise, but I was also in college. And then that kind of started, that bad relationship with food and with exercise and that, push pull. But now I have gotten to a point where I see it differently. I know I talked a little bit before about how I see exercise as energy and strength going into my day. That's how I see it now. I do have days, like you mentioned before, where I need to be at ESPN early and I don't leave my desk until 6, 7 o'clock at night if I'm also, catching the late night 6 o'clock Sports Center late night. But then I don't exercise all day, and I kind of feel like a little bit of a noodle. But me at 21 years old, I would have been like, how dare you not exercise? How dare you not exercise 7 straight days a week? I mean, maybe I'll vent to my mom and be like, ugh, I didn't exercise today. But really deep down inside, I'm okay. Like, I'm fine. But the transition was definitely very hard. Your body just goes into this shock. Like, I don't know what it is. I mean, all my friends, we talk about it, and you kind of start, losing the muscle, but muscle turns to fat, and, we don't have to get into all of that, but it was mentally difficult, but I feel like I kind of came out on the other end of it. But it's not something that, isn't true. Like the transition is definitely very difficult.
Yeah, I remember after graduating, I hurt my foot in the last like 2 months of college, which is like I'd say most notoriously unhealthy portion of college. So I could like barely walk around. I was in a boot and would walk with a decent amount of pain even in the boot. So I was not being active in the slightest during that time. And then after college, I had 4 months off because my start date got pushed back. So I lost 30 pounds in that time because I gained maybe like 10 or 15. You're already probably a little bit heavier in college. And then in those 4 months off, I could lift every day, do some cardio every day, get 8 or 9 hours of sleep. I was eating extremely healthy. And I've also started to really appreciate the rest day. If I have like a super stressful work day and have a lot to do, and I've worked out the past 3 or 4 days, like taking one day off isn't going to kill me. I'll like opt for like a walk after dinner for 20 or 30 minutes or something like that. Like it doesn't need to be like a, kill yourself workout. Just getting, like a nice relaxing walk in and just giving your body a day of rest is definitely healthy.
110%. One thing about this adult world and also not living in New York City, I was thinking about this last night, actually. I think when I was in New York, I was probably the fittest that I had ever been, even in comparison to swimming. Probably not, but I'm over exaggerating. The amount of walking that people do in New York City is out of this world, and you're not even thinking about it. You're walking to get your groceries, you're walking to the subway, you're walking to the office, or you're city biking. So you are constantly on the move. I think the transition of moving to Connecticut, and I mentioned I have a car here. Some mornings I could literally wake up, get ready for work, get in my car, drive to the office, sit at my desk all day, not leave my windowless office. There are no windows by my desk. It is horrible. I have a mood light. And I could get up, leave for the day, get in my car, go home, make dinner, and go to sleep. And I've maybe gotten 800 steps. I have days like that. And it's really, really hard. But I've had to start pushing myself. I mean, after work today, I was like, it's a beautiful day. I spent it all day inside looking at my screen. I have to push myself and go for a walk. As much as I didn't want to, I was exhausted, but I did it. And I felt amazing. So yeah, adulting, pushing yourself to go for a walk after work.
Yeah, I've been pushing myself. I just moved down here to Towson, Maryland for 1 year, pre-med post-bac, but I've been pushing myself to wake up at 7 a.m. every day to work out. And so I'm getting that workout in before class, and then I can just kind of work the rest of the night and then definitely get in a few more walks throughout the rest of the day. But today I woke up, I like had a little bit of a headache. I don't know what it was. I just got some vaccines. So I wasn't sure if like that's kind of what had me feeling down, but I was like, no, I'm still going to just get up and go for like a 45-minute walk rather than hit the gym. And that still felt great, kind of kept me in my routine, and something that I just felt like, okay, I still kind of like hit my goal of the day of kind of being active in the morning. It wasn't like a big run or, I didn't lift, but hey, it was something. And don't like beat yourself up because you weren't feeling it today. And I'm curious, outside of kind of exercise and work, if you pursue any other hobbies. Do you, I don't know. I've been kind of struggling to really adopt one. I've actually been reading a ton lately. I've torn through 2 books in the past 2 weeks, and I'm on to my third. They're very simple fiction books. Percy Jackson. I'm addicted. I'm loving it right now.
Oh, heck yes.
But what are some hobbies that you do, maybe outside of work and exercise?
I think my most toxic hobby is Instagram and TikTok scrolling. So everyone at home, don't do that. Most of my hobbies are active. I love to play golf. I love to hike. So if I have downtime, I'm usually trying to spend it outside. Because I mean, all day during the weekday, I don't have that luxury. I read sometimes. I maybe get through 3 or 4 books a year, but that's usually like a vacation book. And I know for a fact, and I always tell myself this when I get into bed and the book sits at my bedside table, but I always pick up my phone and it's the worst habit. I know I need to read more before bed and I know I need to stop scrolling. So maybe after this podcast, I start making reading a hobby. But yeah, I would definitely say my hobbies are spent outside. I'm looking at my new golf clubs that I purchased for myself this past winter, and I'm very excited to use them this summer. And yeah, there's amazing hiking trails here and mountains that, I go to with friends on the weekends or even by myself, a couple bear spottings, but that's just the Connecticut life.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Stroll. If you like this episode and would like to be in the loop for future episodes while also supporting the podcast, please subscribe to the podcast here and follow the podcast on social media for updates. Our Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube are thestroll_podcast, and our X account is thestroll_pod. I'd like to give another big thank you to Bea for coming on the podcast and for so openly speaking about her experience, both professionally, personally, and as a Division I athlete. Thank you again for listening. Much love, one love.